going up. We'll just get going. Thanks everybody for coming to a special ZombieCon screening of Lucio Fulci's 1979 masterwork, Zombie, aka Zombie 2, aka Zombie Flesh Eaters, aka that one with the zombie versus shark scene that is so righteous. I'm Mark Ronner. I'm the former pop culture writer and one of the movie critics of the Seattle Times. Currently, I'm the perpetrator of a vile piece of trash zombie comic book called Rotten that I hope you'll check out if you go to ZombieCon. Or to put another way, please buy it. It's really cool that in Seattle we get a place where a bunch of degenerates like us can sit under one roof and watch a movie like this. Even cooler is the guest I've got here sitting next to me, the star of Zombie, the handsome and incredibly macho Ian McCulloch. I will ask him a few questions for a while, then we will open it up to the audience, then I will put on a diaper and we'll start the movie, but you had a couple of words first.
Well, a year or so ago, I did a lecture tour in Scotland, where I live, around various universities, and I always felt, I showed the film, but I also felt that I had to sort of introduce myself and where I was in the world. And I always started off by, I don't know, do any of you play golf? Good for you. And it was just a story about two, if you've heard this, forgive me, but it does have a point. There were two elderly golfers about to start playing golf, and one turned to the other and said, excuse me, old boy, but the old eyesight, it isn't what it used to be, so if you could just keep your eye on my ball and sort of tell me where it went, I'd be really grateful. And his friend said, absolutely, old boy, I'll do that. So he sort of waggled his club and he hit the ball off the tee, and he turned to his friend and said, did you see where it went? And his friend said, yes, of course I did, but I forgot. The point of that is this film was sort of 30 years ago that I made it, just over 30 years ago. So you, in fact, may probably know more about it than I do. When I showed it in sort of Edinburgh, the audience knew practically every line of the dialogue. They clapped, they cheered, they found double entendres in this film, which I had no idea existed. And this is a brand new version, as you know, which I hope is going to improve even on that. So,
bearing that in mind, it's a pleasure to be sitting here with Ian McCulloch.
Ian McCulloch.
That was a joke about your joke. It's good to bomb like within the first 5 fucking minutes. So here we are. It's more than 30 years after the movie came out, and you and I are sitting up here like a nerd James Lipton and a zombie Robert Redford. Does it surprise you to have people take this stuff so seriously and be so into it, especially 30 years down the line?
I mean, I find it absolutely astonishing that anyone should want to see this film.
What?
I mean, when I agreed to do it, I thought it was like a Hammer House of Horror, that I would get in and out, the film would be shown, and it would be immediately forgotten, which in fact it was. I mean, the film didn't get good reviews, really, didn't do very well at the box office. And it was only when it was banned and became, in England it's called a video nasty, and it was only after that that it suddenly began to gather this sort of cult following, which sort of has built and built and built. So when I did it sort of 30 years ago, I just thought that was it. I was going to take the money, run, and no one would ever hold it against me. And it is, as you're saying, slightly bizarre, sort of 31 years on. 4,000 miles from home. I'm talking to people here, most of whom I presume weren't even born when this film was made. And it's a remarkable tribute to the film and Lucio Fulci, the director.
Who saw this when it came out? Oh my God, I'm old. I saw this at a drive-in when I was a kid.
Same here.
Okay. Well, you eliminated about half of my questions, so this is going to go fast. I know that you saw the movie for the 25th anniversary DVD. How do you think it's held up over the years?
Well, I thought it was going to be a piece of rubbish. I honestly thought, because I didn't know anything about Lucio Fulci, and then when I saw it in a cinema for the first time, as opposed to doing a commentary for that 25th anniversary through a glass window. I mean, I actually saw that it had been beautifully shot and that he'd edited it in a beautiful way, and that in his own way, and it was his own way, he was a master craftsman of the cinematic art. And I was sort of taken by surprise, and while I'm never impressed by my acting, I was actually impressed by the film.
I was too. I hadn't seen it for a long time before I watched it this week, just to refresh myself. And it's, well, I mean, okay, I was drunk the first time I saw it, so of course it's going to look better. But it was known at the time it came out in '79 as an unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead, which I believe in America translates to a ripoff. However, among all the other movies that generated, this one really still stands out, and I wonder why you think that is.
In all honesty, I have no idea, and I'd have to ask you. I mean, you're the audience. I don't watch it. You're the people that pay money and go and see it, or buy DVDs or tapes in the old days, or the Blu-ray version which is coming out next week. So, I mean, the answer to that is these ladies and gents out front.
Well, I just have one suggestion. The zombies aren't blue. There's some pretty gross-looking zombies.
Yeah, but I understand that when this film was first shown in Japan, they put a blue gauze over half the film because they thought it was too bloody and too gory. So they may not have had blue zombies, but they certainly had.
The Underground is going to put out that edition next, because they're coming. There are about a half a dozen different editions out now. You've done a lot of British TV before this, and you're well known as an actor. You've been at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and yet, at least among Americans, this is what you're known for, zombie. So my question is, ironic, annoying, or glorious?
Disappointing. No, I mean, when I started acting, all I thought I was going to do was to do classical theatre. I never thought I'd do any TV work. I never thought I'd do a single film. And as I was saying to some friends earlier, the highlight and low light of my career, I was doing a play and a big TV series, and about to start the third series of it called Survivors. And my agent rang me up and she said, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that you've been asked to take over from Anthony Hopkins on Broadway in Equus, playing the part of the psychiatrist, which I've done twice in the UK, and it's a stunning, stunning part. And to do that on Broadway would just have been, the pinnacle of my life and career. And then she said, and the bad news is that the BBC won't release you from your contract to do it. So that was what I wanted to do. That's what I expected to do. And all these other things, the big bonus about them is that they paid the mortgage. Theatre never paid the rent.
Right. And so you had a little part in Where Eagles Dare, Clint Eastwood. Yeah, but this was one of your first roles as a leading man.
Other than The Ghouls. Anyone seen The Ghouls?
Oh, yeah.
Good audience. What effect did this have on your career, though?
Which one?
Zombie.
These answers are sounding totally like it had no effect on it whatsoever. I did 3 films very quickly in Italy. I did this one, Zombie. I did Zombie Holocaust, and I did a film called Contamination. I did them all within about 9 months. And just as quickly as I went to Italy to do these films, they stopped asking. And an actor called David Warbeck took all the parts that I thought that I might have been doing in Italian films. So just as soon as it started, just as violently it started, it stopped. And from the date that I did Contamination, I never had a single interview or test or audition for another film for the rest of my acting career.
Why do you think that is? Who did this on?
I don't know, but I don't think it's a story you lot know, because there was a musical called Company, and when it came to London, it had Joel Grey in it. And during rehearsals, he was getting pretty pissed off. And he suddenly shouted out in a foul mood, "Who do I have to fuck to get out of this show?" And someone shouted out, "Who did you fuck to get in it?"
Okay, so who did you fuck to get in Zombie?
Touché.
Let's rewind. How did you come on board as the hero of Zombie Island?
I did a BBC series called Survivors. and it was a big hit all over the world, and particularly in Italy, where it was called Sopravvissuti. And because of that, they asked me, say, without an interview, whatever, would I sort of go and do it. And they said, I was working in a play in Plymouth, in the west of England, and I was in sort of dirty, damp sort of digs. I knew I had no money, I was on rehearsal money. My girlfriend couldn't come down and see it because it was too expensive. My friends couldn't come down. There would be no critics coming down to see it, however good or bad I was. And then a phone call came through from my agent, which was pretty unusual in any case. And she said, it's a peculiar Italian film company, and Survivors is going well in Italy. And they would like you to play one of the leading roles in this. If you're interested, you're going to have up to 2 weeks filming in New York, 2 weeks filming in the Caribbean and the Dominican Republic, and probably 3 weeks filming in Rome, and then another week in Rome later on doing the dubbing. You'll be offered more money than you've earned in the previous year. You'll be paid $1,000 a week living allowance, and they'll take your girlfriend to whichever of the locations she wants to go to as a little gift. I thought about that for a little while and decided to say yes, because nothing like that never occurred in my life. So, I mean, as soon as I finished this play, I went straight off to do it, and I went to the American embassy to get my visa. They just said, go and get your visa and then join us in New York. And I went to the visa office, and the lady said, you're going to New York, what are you going to do there? And I said, I'm making an Italian film. So I was getting really happy. And she said, oh, who's that for? And I said, variety films. And she said, just a minute. And she went backstage in the office, and she came back and said, we have no record of any Italian film company having permission to film in New York. So we suggest you go back, talk to the people who are employing you, and come back and see us tomorrow. And I then rang them up and said, you're not supposed to tell them we're working there, because everything we're doing in New York is illegal. You don't have permission to do anything. So I had to go back in and say, and I made a mistake, right, I'm going to New York on my way to the Dominican Republic. And this very sweet lady looked at me straight in the eye and said, we're not fucking stupid. She wrote in my passport, will not act or perform in any site or any venue in the United States. And it's still in my sort of passport. I arrived in New York, and the very next day we were filming on Broadway. They used New York policemen for the scenes. I mean, they did everything that they could possibly do to get up the noses of the authorities, and got away with it. And they had policemen, let's say, who were off duty wearing police uniforms. They went where they weren't supposed to go. I mean, they are troublemakers beyond compare when they want to be.
Right, so I understand the film was notoriously low budget. How else did that manifest itself apart from not getting permits? But the craft services suck.
Well, not getting paid much money. No, they just chopped and changed and took any location they wanted to. And when I made this film, I don't know whether it's on the commentary as well, but when I made this film, they were making another soft porn movie at the same time. They filmed on the plane flying out to New York. They filmed in the hotel in New York, in the corridors, in the bedrooms. They filmed on the plane going to the Dominican Republic and then going back to Rome. They honestly just didn't care what they were doing. And when we were going through customs, they just said to me, pretend to be Italian. You don't understand what the American customs officers are saying. So they just took a chance on anything and everything. And if they could save money by doing that. I mean, Italian film workers, work like nobody's business. I mean, they don't have breaks. And if they have coffee, it's one of those tiny little coffees. They have this tiniest bit of pasta. They work all hours. And they sort of do it for a love of the business. And it's a sort of attribute and character that I haven't seen in any sort of other sort of film industry in any other country. And especially not in my own, in the UK.
So part of the crew and cast were English speaking and part only spoke Italian, right?
Yeah.
How did that play out? I mean, I realize a giant splinter through the eyeball is the universal language, but was it confusing on the set?
I mean, you just sort of did what you were asked to do. And I say, Olga Carlotta spoke in Greek, and Richard Johnson and I spoke in English, and the Italian actors spoke in sort of Italian. And the clever thing about all the films I did was they were all in profit before the camera turned over on the first day. They pre-sold sort of tapes and the films and everything beyond Italy, knowing that their big profits were going to be in Italy itself and probably in France and in America. But they pre-sold to Japan, they sold all the rights in South America, which brought them a huge amount of money. And I say every one of the 3 films I did knew that they were onto a winner before they even started.
Okay, now let's talk about the one scene, the shark versus the zombie scene. What did you make of that?
Bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you weren't actually in the scene, but you were up above.
I was supposedly up above in the boat. I had no idea what they were doing. And when you see it in the script form, you just don't think it's going to be possible. And then when I saw it say on this big screen, and there's this guy wandering around, made up as how he stayed on underwater, I don't know, as a zombie, and sort of playing around with his fish. I mean, I actually found it disappointing that with all the sort of bites and things, that's one of the scenes where there was no blood. And, perhaps it was sort of saving sort of cruelty to animals or whatever, but that the shark, however many times the zombie bit it, nothing, no ruptures on the skin or anything.
Aren't you suggesting there are portions of this movie that aren't entirely realistic?
There are a few moments, apart from the acting, that aren't realistic.
This scene shows up in a commercial for like what, a credit card or something? Did anybody remember the commercial?
Microsoft.
A Microsoft commercial, the shark versus zombie scene in an actual commercial on TV this last year. Doesn't that kind of blow your mind a little bit?
I have no idea.
Okay. Lucio Fulci, he did a bunch of filth that degenerates like us all love, City of the Living Dead, Beyond. Did he strike you as sort of a journeyman filmmaker cranking out another film, or just as a fucking lunatic?
When I first met him, I didn't actually know what to make of him. He had reasonably good English, but it wasn't very sort of brilliant. And when we made the film, he treated Richard Johnson and myself with a lot of respect, because I thought he thought that we were actors who sort of hit the marks, say the right lines, remember them in the right order. But what sort of struck in my mind was that he was very sort of voluble, used to get very angry, and my pet dislike about him was that he picked on Aretta Gay, who was a beautiful little girl in it, who wasn't an actress. I think she was a dentist's secretary.
Which one was she?
She's the one who took her clothes off and went swimming.
Oh, yes, that one.
That one.
Okay. So
he sort of bullied her a lot. And while I didn't like it at the time, I think there are some times when some directors are directing some actors that they have to bully, and that they have to shout, and they have to find some way of dragging out the performance that they want from whoever it is. I mean, lots of people do it. Lots of sort of the top directors do it. They usually pick on the weakest person they can find. But because this girl, wasn't an actress, however sort of keen she was, and she really did want to do well. I mean, he felt that he had to get angry and shout. And Richard Johnson says that he actually saw him one day throw himself on the ground and start eating mud, because he was so angry with this girl. She wasn't doing what he wanted.
I don't think I've ever been quite that angry.
But it's a Plantagenet thing. Plantagenet King used to do it.
A little bit about Richard Johnson. I don't know if everybody knows who he is. He was in the Bulldog Drummond movies in the 60s. He was a candidate for James Bond. He was in The Haunting, and he turns up in this. What was your experience with him, and how did he strike you?
I knew Richard before. We were both members of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he was one of the actors that I most admired he was about 10 years older than me. But I thought he was a phenomenal actor. The fact that he was in the film, I thought was sort of great. He had, I don't know whether you find it, one of the peculiar things about all these Italian films is that it seems to me that they're written in reasonably good Italian, and then someone translates them into very bad American or very bad English. And they're always in the style of a 1940s film, and the dialogue is ghastly. And Richard was one of the people who, however bad it was, could always make it sound good. And I know that I can't.
So there was some ad-libbing.
he did a lot of it.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't dare do any. But he just has this facility for making crap sound pure gold.
Okay, Tisa Farrow. I just like saying that name, Tisa Farrow. This movie didn't exactly ignite her career, did it?
I think she did one film about Vietnam afterwards, and then another film that you sort of talked about. And she doesn't, for whatever reason, she sort of faded away. I think she became a nurse, or the last I thought she was a taxi driver as well in LA. I don't know whether that's true. And she doesn't care to go to these sort of conventions.
We got a kissing scene with her, a makeout scene with her, and then these zombie hands come out and start grabbing the two of you. I think we've got a term for that here. You were zombie cockblock.
I'd said voyeurs. I have to say this is. I kept on thinking I've done these 3 films and I'm playing a leading role and I haven't kissed a single girl. And I don't think I actually kissed her. Well, you'll see later on. But, I don't remember kissing.
Really?
No. And I thought it was pretty rotten to be playing.
You don't want to admit that to a woman.
Well, it's the audience. It's a worrisome.
Okay.
No, never.
So you play a newspaper reporter in the movie, and as a former, up until recently, newspaper reporter, I have some critiques. Lucio Fulci shows up as your editor in a cameo, and frankly, he's not enough of a douchebag to be a real editor.
Well, it's your world. I don't know anything about it. We shot that. I mean, I think it's true. Again, what I said about cheating, they bribed the caretaker or janitor of a newspaper office on a Saturday, whatever night they were closed, to go in and use a whole floor. I mean, this is a unit of 50 people just invaded and took over the whole, used the instruments, had all the lights. And I'm quite sure, from my memory, that it was actually Rupert Murdoch himself who suddenly appeared at the door and said, "What the fuck's going on here?" and made the whole unit sort of leave.
That's right, you ran into Rupert Murdoch.
Well, I thought
in the
it was
70s. You could have killed him. You could have stopped Fox News and you didn't do it. What's wrong with you?
My apologies.
I don't know how much you want to talk about Zombie Holocaust or Contagion or the rest of this trio of nasties that you did, because we're sort of short on time. Let's just skip ahead and let the audience ask some questions. I was reading a blurb on Amazon for Contamination, and it described you as a long-suffering cult star. Were you long-suffering? Did you have fun with this stuff?
To do all the things that I said at the beginning, paid money to go to all these places that I'd never have gone to. It was just sort of magical. And the great thing, I mean, the Italians are fantastic people, and they treat you like a friend, so with dignity. They invite you into their homes. And I say, while I was there, this television series was still going on, so that sort of gave me additional sort of happy sort of times. But you've quoted about contamination. The other thing I was going to say at the beginning was that critics aren't always very kind to actors, and I don't know whether critics would really have written the scripts of these things. But you all probably know the sort of famous critique of Katharine Hepburn, which said that her acting ran the full gamut of emotions from A to B. A friend of mine reviewed George Lazenby when he was playing James Bond, and he said that Lazenby had all the facial expressions of an Easter Island statue. Pretty common. And in the same way, coming back to me, I don't know if any of you, there's a lovely website called Eat Your Brains or Eat My Brains, one of the two. And there's a review, not of this film, but of Zombie Holocaust. And I mean, it's my favorite notice of all time. And it says, when they've run out of ideas in the Italian schlock industry, Ian McCulloch listlessly wanders the earth, looking like a man in need of a beer and a shag. I think that's a wonderful opening line. And if you're worried, all I'm looking for is a glass of white wine afterwards.
That I might be able to help you with. And how about now? Are you retired now? Do you bond over Zombie with your grandchildren? What's your life like now?
My wife walked out of this film after 10 minutes. I think it's also on the commentary, but my wife's uncle sat on a House of Lords committee in the UK, and they were asked by the Metropolitan Police to view 20 videos about to be released with a view to banning them. And he sat on this committee, and I met him one day, and I said, what have you been doing? Because he didn't look very happy. And he said, well, the police have asked us to see these horrible films, terrible thing. And I said, what were they? He said, well, they're all horror films, admittedly. And I said, well, you'll see me, because I'm in 3 of them. And he just looked at me and said, Ian, how could you? But I say it was that action by that group of English British peers that sort of launched this film onto its fame. And I don't know whether it's true or not. The year before I went to Italy, they'd made 365 films. And the year I went to do Zombie, they did 36. I mean, rather like that. The whole thing sort of plummeted and crashed. And I think it was because of the success of this that the Italian film industry recovered. And I think it's because of the success and strength and longevity of this and the Romero films that you're all watching The Walking Dead and enjoying it. And they've had all these sort of long lives.
What do you think when you see The Walking Dead on AMC getting giant ratings when that stuff was fairly ghettoized back when you did it?
I'd like to be in it.
Yeah. There needs to be a Quentin Tarantino of zombies. Put all you guys in this movie. Okay, why don't we take some questions? Who has a question? Actually, I can't see where to look at you. Oh, sorry, right up here.
Yep. So I read someplace that Lucio Fulci, he characterized Tisa Farrow as an odd girl.
Odd.
Odd, yes. And how was she to work with?
Well, she was, forgive me for saying, she was very American. I mean, I'm very English, and I'm probably sort of uptight and anal, whatever the rest is. But she was very American, very, very, very open, which sort of took me rather aback. It was like walking into a gale. He may have said that, but I know that it didn't stop him, forgive me again, sort of sticking his tongue down her throat in the very first scene that she was in the film, on the boat. I mean, out of the blue, unexpected, uninvited, and not reciprocated. So perhaps that's why he said she was odd. And I don't know whether it's true or not, but I mean, I was told after the film that she had a false eye, which the whole of the film, I had no idea what. I mean, that may be good makeup on my bad eyesight, but I had no idea. She was just a nice girl. She got on with it, was bright, cheerful. But as I say, it was just very American as opposed to me being very British.
Any other questions? Yep, right up front.
Did you have any interaction with Lucio after that one movie, or?
When the film finished, I never saw him again. And I suppose I sort of tended to dismiss him. And it was only when I started doing these conventions that I looked up his CV, and I realized that he'd studied and trained with some of the greats of the Italian film industry, that he had a huge CV in the world, a massive amount. And that the sadness of his life when he died, because he died in pretty some dismal circumstances of diabetes, was that in his mind, he was just going to be remembered for Zombies, The Beyond, or those. And he thought he had better work, and better work that he wanted to do. So I think he probably was a pretty sad person all his life, because he had some pretty sort of dismal things happen. And when people say things about him, I just think, like a lot of other people, it's just unfortunate that he isn't around to answer some of the questions that you're asking, which he would have answered sort of better, and I would give you his side rather than mine.
Do you believe that some of this came out in his movies, though? Because they're pretty disturbing.
But that's just the style. I mean, he has his style. Argento has his style, and we're all frightened of something. And people say there's too much blood, but since primitive times, we've always sort of let blood, sort of killed animals, killed one another. Sort of late sort of Middle Ages, people were sort of slitting their throats, wrists, to let blood out to make them feel sort of better or get better. I mean, it was just other than his preoccupation with eyes, it was just
There is a lot of ocular trauma in Fulci's work.
there's something optical.
Yeah. All right, one last question, and then we should probably start.
Is there a better film than Zombie?
A better film.
Yeah. Is there one better film
When
than
Harry Met
Zombie?
Sally. You're all hopefully instead of fantasy. I mean, I don't like horror films. I wouldn't go and watch horror. It's not a genre that I appreciate. And you know, when I'm doing it, I mean, obviously I'm being paid, so I say the words as convincingly as I could. The same review said that I gave exactly the same. I saved energy by giving exactly the same performance. I was called the same person. You know, you'd be very good to sort of come out to these late hours and stand outside and
There's one more
Seattle
person over
sunset.
there.
Were zombies as real a threat in that time, and were you able to channel that fear into your character?
Well, I have to say, in all honesty, I never thought about that too seriously. But the bizarre thing is, and I don't know whether it's true here, but local councils in England are being asked if they've got zombie protection plans. It sounds loony and illogical. And they're answering it seriously as well, saying usually that they haven't, but they're going to prepare them.
Well, that's a, okay, one more back there.
Have you seen Shaun of the Dead?
No, I haven't seen any of those. I haven't seen a Romero film. I'd probably be too, well, that's a comedy. I'd probably be too frightened.
All right, well,
Okay.
Zombie has one of the best taglines of any movie in the world.
We are going to eat you.
We are going to eat you.
Is that eat you or eat your brain?
We're going to eat you. We are going to eat you. So in the spirit of that, I'd like to invite you all to eat me and to give a big round of applause to Ian McCulloch.